Hey everyone, Mike Miller, Herald Times, joined by columnist Jeremy Price, coming to you after a 35-21 Indiana loss to number 24 Michigan State here at Memorial Stadium, Indiana's Big Ten opener. Not quite as the Hoosiers thought it might go in a matchup that appeared to be strength on strength. Indiana's run game against Michigan State's run defense. The Spartans were the overwhelming victor in that department. Indiana managing only 29 yards on 32 carries, just never had a running game at all. Peyton Ramsey ends up throwing it 46 times for 272 yards, a couple TDs, a couple interceptions. Defense had 4 takeaways, 18 points off those takeaways. A bit of an up and down, even so. I think it's fair to say a frustrating night for Indiana, just given the momentum, given the play that it had, the optimism that it had kind of cultivated over the first 3 weeks of the season. Different team against a better level of competition.
Really, this was sort of a weird game when you get right down to it. I think the reason it leaves everybody feeling so empty is because of the start that Indiana got off to, giving up that early touchdown, then the pick six for a touchdown, which was kind of one of those fluky, weird plays. I mean, you can say maybe Ramsey shouldn't have thrown it or whatever, but most of the time that falls pretty harmless.
I have a problem with him throwing that.
It just happens to take a bad bounce. It goes right to the defender who has nothing but green grass in front of him. And next thing you know, it's 14-0, and pretty much all the air is out of the balloon in this stadium at that point. And it was just an uphill climb from there for Indiana. And, even though they got within 7 a couple of times, never really felt like they had a chance to win this game. And I think that's why you walk away with the feeling you do in this one, that it was so disappointing against a team that you felt like you could play with. And honestly, when you look at the statistics, by and large, it's not like there was some great discrepancy and Indiana was grossly outclassed. But I think there were some key things that went on that showed you that Indiana's maybe not quite where we thought they were just yet.
Yeah, to go with that, I think in another sense, this was a night that was almost true to the soul of Indiana football, in a sense where you have this optimism coming in here, where you're looking at really what appeared to be a toss-up game between these two teams. I think when you really boil it down, recruiting-wise, even Michigan State probably gets a few more high-end prospects than Indiana does in recruiting, but by and large, they're still recruiting there's general similarities in the talent pool that both programs are bringing in. And really, what you've seen the past couple of years are two teams that do match up fairly comparably on the football field. And tonight, it just, in a lot of ways, whether it was through the start of it, through really very empty middle portion of the game for Indiana, it just didn't feel that way. Especially given everything you thought maybe this team could be. I think we saw a little bit of a ceiling put on Indiana's offensive upside. I still think there's upside there, but against one of the better defensive lines you're going to see, and you're going to see a few more in this Big Ten East.
Yes.
This was not at all what you want to see, especially just basically from start to finish, seeing that offensive line, which looked like it had really righted itself so far this season, was just not good at all.
Yeah, no. This was by far the worst night of the season for the offensive line. Long way to go there. But to your point, I think this was a vintage Indiana football performance in the sense that you have all this optimism coming in. The air goes out of the balloon early. And then just the things that happened in this game, from the interception return for touchdown, some calls that didn't go Indiana's way. Second half, Indiana has a strip sack and it bounces right to the Michigan State offensive lineman. And maybe if that ball bounces right to an Indiana player, they run it in for 6. The same. I mean, it just was kind of one of those games that summed up everything that is Indiana football, that there's teases and flashes of potential, but the calls, the bounces, the execution is just not up to par. So in that sense, it was a very vintage Indiana football game. Yet, I think there's still some silver linings that can be taken from this. If you'd have said before this game that Indiana was going to force 4 turnovers in this game, you'd been like, they got a good chance to win. They forced 4 turnovers, and it still didn't feel like they had any chance to win. So, weird night from that standpoint. Ramsey winds up throwing the 2 picks. The one was the pick 6 for touchdown. The other one, I think, was just kind of trying to force it there in the fourth quarter when it was all kind of irrelevant anyway at that point. So, nothing to get worked up there. I think the biggest thing, two things there. One, the offensive line has to get better in terms of giving Ramsey time to throw, especially if he's going to be throwing 46 times. I think we saw why you don't want Peyton Ramsey throwing the ball 46 times. Secondly, I thought Ramsey let the rush get to him, especially once he threw that pick six. He kind of was hearing footsteps sometimes when they weren't there. Wasn't really patient. Wasn't letting his eyes get downfield to the receivers. Definitely had one eye on the rush at that point. And I keep in mind as a guy that started a lot last year, but first full year really in charge of a program, developing. I think that it's still very much a work in progress for him. And this game sort of calls into question, where does Indiana sit with a Michael Penix? Where do you want to use him? How do you want to use him? I thought if you were going to use him in this game, it was going to have to be second quarter, early third quarter. Once you got late third quarter, Michigan State's up 2 or 3 touchdowns. Their defense was smelling blood by that point.
Yeah.
That wasn't probably an optimal situation you want to bring Michael Penix into, where they're just teeing off on the quarterback and he's going to get belted. And, unless you just want to say, here, throw it deep, kid. I mean, that would have been the only thing that you could have done with Penix.
And even then, you're not even getting 5 seconds
to
snap to even throw. So I don't really think Michael Penix makes much of a difference in this game. And again, why I don't really think you throw your freshman quarterback in a situation where there's just no time to throw. I don't really know that was there. I don't know that there was an easy answer basically tonight. It just kind of was what it was. Indiana just wasn't up to blocking, whether it was running, passing, what have you.
There just wasn't a lot of upside in using Penix.
Yes, exactly.
Again, keeping in mind that while we don't think that he's going to redshirt, that's still a possibility. To waste one of those 2 remaining games that he's still got in the bag on this one at this point. If you weren't going to do it early, why do it at all?
I also need to apologize. I wrote a story this week about how healthy Indiana was, and we're going to have to scrub that from the internet after this game, after this week, apparently.
I said we need to blame Tom Allen. He's the one that said we're as healthy as we've ever been since I've been here. Yeah,
he did. Yes, exactly. Those are his words.
He should have just said no comment and let it go, but he couldn't do that.
Yeah. All right, Luke Timian didn't play, a guy who would have been one of the ideal guys. Again, it was tough throwing today, but he was one of the guys that against this Michigan State defense, a guy who kind of is adept at finding the holes, finding the seams and creases. He was not available. Sounded like, based on pregame radio, the postgame press conference, I'm not sure he was even asked postgame. I think that ended pretty abruptly.
Yeah.
Not much to say. But it did sound like they are optimistic Timian will be back next week. Fillier got dinged. He played less than 100% tonight. He said it's hard to even stand and ask questions, though I'm not sure it was necessarily the foot that was hurting him. Jacob Robinson didn't play. And I believe, what was it? Cam Jones.
Cam Jones came down on a shoulder after that interception. Really nice play.
Which, man, if that sums up a portion of Indiana football, too. I mean, maybe one of the best plays to see, and then you got to leave the game not feeling too well after that one. It didn't exactly get out of this game, or I guess more fairly this week, unscathed. You have a Rutgers next week, and you'd think you can. Indiana should be at the point where they can take care of Rutgers on the road. That's for sure. There are definitely some injury things to monitor with this team moving forward.
And to add to that, you had Marcelino Ball get called for targeting there in the third quarter. Lost him for the remainder of this game, and you're going to be missing him for the first half at Rutgers next week, as Tom Allen mentioned in the postgame press conference that Indiana was on their third string Husky by the end of the game with Jones hurt and Ball ejected. And depending on the injury status for Jones, they may start with their third string next week and have to hope they can get by for a half and bring Ball back in the second half. So even when there's not injuries, there's insult added to injury, I guess, in the case of Marcelino Ball. So, which was yet another one of those plays that just, and Allen said this, that I don't think there was any malicious intent from Ball on that play. He wasn't trying to hurt anybody, wasn't trying to play dirty, but by the technicality of the rule, he was leading with the helmet to make that tackle. It was a tough play when the quarterback decides to slide a split second before you're trying to make the tackle. But, a rule I just despise in college football is that targeting rule and the ejection that comes with it. If you want to give the 15 yards, give the 15 yards. I'd like to see guys get at least like 2 of those before they get ejected. It just seems unduly harsh, but nonetheless, another call that did not go Indiana's way tonight.
We could do a whole scoop talk on the calls. We could write a book on Big Ten calls. calls. Really, frankly, all the calls we've seen over the years. There were, I mean, objectively, there were some bad calls tonight. There's no doubt about it. And Tom Allen was, I think rightfully fuming on a couple of them. But ultimately,
That said, you never, I guess maybe that touchdown at the end of the first half was probably the one that maybe had the most impact on this game. But all in all, the fact is, if Indiana plays better, executes better, performs better, all that's really irrelevant. Mm-hmm. And that's ultimately got to be the goal for this Indiana team, to get to the point where it is good enough to play through the bad calls, play through the bad bounces, and still have a chance to win a game. And right now, they're not there yet.
Maybe more so than the calls, I think the one play that was almost indicative of where Indiana football is was really, I think, one of the first plays of the game where I think it was Reese Taylor on a wheel route on the near sideline. The ball was maybe 3-4 inches out of his reach. So close, yet so far. I feel like if that play is made, he's in the end zone, we're talking about maybe a different tone to this game, different things are happening, maybe even a different result.
It could have easily been 7-0. And the next possession, they went deep for Hale again, and I think Michigan State got called for holding on that particular one. But what's a 10-yard penalty compared to giving up a 60-yard touchdown? So Indiana started off the game taking some deep shots. Didn't wind up the game so much that way, but if they'd hit a couple of those early, different story. But it's Indiana football.
So here's where you are now. It's always weird to use these words in September, but it's Rutgers. It's a must-win. It's the game where if you're navigating, carving that path in the offseason, saying, all right, here's how we can get to 6 or 7, what have you. You're beating Rutgers on the road. I mean, it is a road game, and traditionally, outside of last year's game, Rutgers Indiana games have been a little squirrely. But given where Rutgers' program is, I mean, you have to expect Indiana to go in there and get a win. Whether it's convincing or not, they have to win that game. But it also kind of shows you where Indiana's program is now. Clearly, still not at the level where they can beat the top 4 in the division. They're close still, but they have to still prove that they can beat these 50-50 games. As Rutgers, as Maryland, even the Iowa, which is will be the next home game here. This is really where Indiana must assert itself before it can really get to the next point, beating these teams like Rutgers, which is next week.
Yeah, and it would have been a classic trap game had Indiana won this game and then Ohio State after that. I think the way that this team lost tonight, just I think I got the tone, whether it was Allen, whether it was the players. A lot of people really disappointed, really frustrated with the performance tonight, that it just wasn't up to the level that this team expects to perform at. And from that standpoint, I would expect them to be ready and raring to go in Piscataway.
Piscataway.
Enjoy that trip, Mike.
No comment.
I'll be here for Hoosier Hysteria.
Yeah, you will. All right.
Lucky me.
And I guess, honestly, we'll end there. That I think, from the Indiana perspective, that's maybe the overarching disappointment. You have a night where you have 45,000 fans, a lot of optimism bubbling in the stands of, is this team for real? Is this team ready to take that next step and build off of what they did in non-conference? You got to win games. You got to seize the moment. Indiana's still struggling with that portion of everything. As we said earlier, it's just you feel like you've seen this game in so many different forms and fashions over years, especially recently. Indiana just not able to get it done. Even when it was close, it didn't really feel all that close late in the fourth quarter. So to Rutgers they go, and to Rutgers we will follow. We'll see you there. Jeremy's headed to Hoosier Hysteria. Big week for IU Athletics on tap. Stay tuned. See ya.